2 lives, 1 beginning, same poverty, same pain, same broken roof, same empty fridge. But what happened next changed everything. His name was Marcus, and he grew up knowing hunger like a best friend. Every night, cold food, silence, and a father who never came home. His name was Daniel, same zip code, same government cheese, same hand-me-down shoes. But something inside him looked at the world differently. They grew up 3 blocks apart, attended the same underfunded school, wore the same dollar store sneakers. The world gave them both nothing. By 16, Marcus had learned one lesson the world kept teaching him. You are a victim, and he believed it with every cell in his body. Daniel at 16? He was at the library at 9 p.m. Not because school required it, because something in him refused to let his ZIP code write his ending. Same shoes, same sidewalk. But 2 completely different directions they were about to walk in. Marcus watched his mother cry over bills every month, and he made a decision the world owed him something. The world had taken too much. Daniel's mother did the same, cried the same tears. But then she looked at him and whispered, "This is not where our story ends, baby." Same childhood. Different lens, and that lens would determine everything. By 25, Marcus had a list. A long list, everyone who wronged him. His absent father, his broken school, his old neighborhood, society itself. Daniel at 25 had a list too, but his was different. Goals, steps, names of people he wanted to thank after he made it. Marcus couldn't hold a job, not because he lacked intelligence, but because every correction felt like an attack. Every boss was another oppressor. Daniel stayed late, asked questions, made himself useful. Not because he was desperate, but because he understood the door doesn't open itself. People tried to help Marcus, but he had built a wall around his pain and called it identity. To let it go felt like losing. The only story he knew. Daniel journaled every morning. He wrote down where he came from and then where he chose to go. He processed pain instead of becoming it. At 28, same age, Marcus spent his mornings feeding his anger. Daniel spent his building his body, his mind, his future. Bitter people can't sit still in peace. Every family dinner became a courtroom. Every conversation became a trial. Marcus was always the prosecutor. Daniel laughed easily. Not because life was easy, but because he had stopped asking life to owe him laughter. He created it himself. There's a moment every bitter person faces, alone in a mirror, 3 a.m, and the question hangs there, is this who I want to be? Daniel wrote those words at 30. He'd earned every callous, but he refused to let those calluses become chains. Marcus turned down opportunities. Not consciously, but unconsciously, because part of him believed success would invalidate his suffering. Daniel found mentors, not because they were handed to him, but because he was humble enough to ask. Humble enough to listen. Pain is neutral. What you do with it, that's the only variable that matters. By 32, Marcus was still living 3 blocks from where he started. The world was still wrong. He was still waiting for it to apologize. Daniel had opened a small business, not glamorous, but his. Built from every rejection, every late night, every moment he chose to move forward instead of backward. He didn't have a fairy godmother. He had grit. He had mornings where quitting felt logical, but he chose again every single day. Marcus had the same grit, buried under the same wounds. But every time it surfaced, bitterness smothered it like a fire under a blanket. Psychologists call it post-traumatic growth. The research is clear. Trauma does not determine your outcome. Your interpretation of trauma does. The brain that decides it is permanently damaged stays damaged. The brain that decides pain is. Information uses that information to build. Dr. Viktor Frankl survived the Holocaust and wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude. Every hard childhood creates a fork in the road. One path says, I am what was done to me. The other says, I decide what I become." At 38, Marcus had kept his wound polished, and in doing so had slowly lost everyone who ever tried to love him. Daniel's birthday was loud, not because he was rich, because he had spent a decade building relationships instead of grieving the ones he never had. A closed fist can't receive anything, neither can a closed heart. Then one night something broke open in Marcus. Not his will, not his future, his story, the one he'd been telling himself for 38 years. He'd written it thousands of times in his mind. I failed because they failed me first. But sitting there in the rain, the sentence felt hollow for the first time. He called his sister. Hadn't spoken in 4 years, she answered. And for the first time in decades, Marcus didn't start the conversation with blame. Same night, parallel lives, one man finally cracking open. One man already living inside the life that crack can lead to. Daniel talked about his past openly, without shame, without performance. It was real, and it had made him real. That was enough. Marcus walked into therapy, 40 years old, terrified, and sat down with the most dangerous question a bitter person can ever ask. What is my part in this? The therapist asked him. What would your life look like if your pain was information instead of identity? And something inside Marcus shattered open. The Japanese have a word, kintsugi, the art of repairing broken things with gold. The belief that what is broken becomes more beautiful for having been broken. Marcus was 40 years old in a library. It felt embarrassing. And then it felt like the bravest thing he had ever done. Daniel went back to the neighborhood. Not to escape it in his rearview mirror, but to hand something forward. Because that's what growth does. It multiplies. Marcus took a job he thought was beneath him, and found for the first time that dignity lives in the doing, not the title. He practiced the apology for 3 weeks. His son was 19. And Marcus was finally ready to stop blaming the world long enough to say, I failed you. I'm sorry. His son said 2 words. Okay, Dad. And those 2 words undid 30 years of armor. It was never about geography. It was about the story he carried with him everywhere he went. And for the first time, he was finally editing it. Research from the University of North Carolina found that people who reframe traumatic experiences as challenges to overcome show measurably greater resilience, income growth, and relationship satisfaction. The most powerful thing a wounded person can do is tell the truth about their wound without letting it be the only thing they are. Daniel never pretended his childhood was a gift. He said it plainly. It was hard. I was scared, and I chose to let it make me stronger instead of smaller. At 45, both men are building different things, different timelines, but both are finally undeniably moving forward. Marcus found woodworking. And in shaping raw wood into something useful, he found a metaphor he hadn't been looking for. That raw materials are not destiny. Every day is a sunrise. The question is whether you're watching it or hiding from it. Psychologists call it a closed explanatory loop. The victim mindset feeds itself evidence. It selectively notices everything that confirms the story and ignores everything that doesn't. Post-traumatic growth is not optimism. It's not denial. It's the active decision to extract meaning from pain and use that meaning as fuel. Daniel at 50. Quiet evening. Grandchildren he wasn't sure he'd ever have. A life he wasn't sure he deserved. And the knowledge that he chose this. Marcus at 50. Sitting across from a 20-year-old who looks exactly like he did at 20. And saying the thing no one said to him. You are not your ZIP code. Here is the part where we stop talking about Marcus and Daniel and start talking about you. What story are you telling yourself right now about your childhood, about who wronged you, about why you haven't started yet? Because the story you tell yourself about your past is the blueprint for your future. And you are the author, not them. Your past happened, it was real. The pain was real. The absence was real. The hunger was real. No one is asking you to pretend it wasn't. But there is a difference between honoring your wound and living inside it. One heals you. The other imprisons you. The most radical act of self-respect is refusing to let your hardest chapter become your whole book. History is full of people who were handed nothing and built something anyway, not because they had more. Chose differently. Somewhere right now a child is growing up the way you did. What they make of it will depend on the story they learn to tell about it. Post-traumatic growth is not a talent. It is not reserved for the lucky. It is a skill, a practice, a daily decision, and it is available to you right now. Your wound is real. Your worth is real. Your choice is the only variable. You don't need to have it figured out. You just need to begin. And one sentence. One honest sentence about who you want to become. Marcus and Daniel. Same beginning, different middle S. Both still writing their endings. And so are you. The neighborhood didn't change. The world didn't apologize. But the story changed. And the story is everything. 2 roads. 1 childhood. And right now you are standing at the fork. Which story are you choosing? The only prison that holds you forever is the one you build with your own beliefs. You have the key. You always have. Use it. Reconciliation is not a moment. It is a meal, a glance, a silence that no longer needs to be filled with blame. Marcus finally sat down at the table he had walked away from for 30 years. Daniel never forgot where he came from. He turned it into a classroom, because nothing teaches resilience more powerfully than someone who lived it standing in front of you still standing. Growth does not happen in an instant. It happens in the quiet, invisible moments when you choose again and again to plant something instead of burn it. Studies from the University of North Carolina confirm. People who actively reframe traumatic experiences report higher life, satisfaction, deeper relationships, and a stronger sense of personal purpose at every age. Marcus returned to the house not to live in it again, but to say goodbye to it and to the version of himself who believed he could never leave. Freedom is not a destination. It is a direction. And every step you take away from the story that imprisoned you is a step toward the life that was always waiting. 2 men, same start, different stories they chose to tell. And both of those stories are still being written with every choice, every morning, every moment they decide who they want to be. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is a choice. Growth is a decision, and that decision is yours, right now, today. Today, if this video hits something in you, share it with one person who needs it. You might never know whose Marcus moment you just triggered with a single click. That is the power you have. Use it. This is what growth looks like in real life. Not a highlight reel, not a miracle. Just ordinary people making the courageous, unglamorous, daily decision to keep going and to keep becoming. Marcus. The story is not over. It has never been over. It is right now just beginning. And the next chapter? That one is entirely yours to write.